These are my answers to how likely I thought I would be. Maybe, and as I look at the last 9 years, I don't know how it was determined, but it seemed like some years I got a little email that said, please fill out this form, you're getting a 3% cost of living raise. Other years, the summer just came and went and that email didn't show up. Okay, so maybe, maybe you get it, I don't know. 10%, probably not. 20%, I thought that was funny, And so I just remember sitting at my in-laws' dining room table once, just thinking, okay, 20% raise isn't even enough money for what I want to do for my family, and it's a laughable amount. It won't even happen, and it's not enough money. So I quickly realized that the sources of additional income were not going to come from raises in my job. I don't want to be pessimistic about the possibilities. Maybe we get some big donors in your town. Atlanta just inherited the rights to Gone with the Wind, that book. But we were immediately told that none of that money was going to campus ministry. So, anything's possible. We want to be optimistic. But I realized in the short term, in my life, I had to look elsewhere for income. And I did think, well, what if I worked really hard and tried to make a big deal and raise money? And I thought, I could dedicate my whole life to trying to make lay campus ministers get paid more. And my life may end before I get that accomplished, or I may get a 10% raise. So I quickly moved on, and I also decided that I wasn't going to be upset or pessimistic or mad about it, because I sort of thought through and I thought, I think most people that I know that are above me in our church structure wanted to pay me more. I remember at one of the thank you dinners, the priest who had hired me, he was saying thank you to the volunteers. He said, thank you to the staff. I wish I had a pot of gold with which to pay you what you deserve. And I believed him. I think he would love to have doubled our salaries. But he didn't have it. And they don't have the money. The reason they don't have the money is because we're not tithing enough. And I'm in the we. I'm in the group of people that aren't tithing enough, so the church has enough. So I realized I was really I couldn't not be part. I'd have to be outside the church and not be part. I was part of the reason that was a laugh out loud. Because I wasn't tithing enough. Well, why wasn't I tithing enough? I would say I didn't have much extra to tithe. I wasn't making enough. So trying to take personal responsibility for the whole picture instead of blaming, I said, it comes back to me. It comes back to me. So I decided I wasn't going to be mad at anyone. I wasn't going to be upset at anyone. I was just going to make more money. Have you guys calculated how much you have before? Yes. Does everyone here know what you make per hour? You're part-time, they maybe already told you make $15 an hour or whatever it is. But if you're on a salary, I want you, I really do want you to do this. I want you to think about how many hours you work. Now, do you know the real shortcut if you work like a 9-to-5 job, how to quickly convert your salary into $1 per hour? The real quick shortcut is to take your annual salary and divide by 2,000. And that's sort of based on if you worked 9 to 5 with an hour break, you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's 40 hours, 50 weeks a year, 2 weeks off vacation, 2,000 hours. So sort of a quick average is that in a 9 to 5 job where you take your lunch break and get some more days off, you work about 2,000 hours. So if you make $35,000 a year, divide that by 2,000, that's too tough, you just drop off all the zeros. 35 divided by 2, 17.5, you make $17.50 per hour. Now, I know in ministry, you have no idea what 9 to 5 is. That's sort of the plus and the minus of our job, right? So I want you to take a minute to really think through how many hours you work a year. But when you're in ministry, you probably don't work 9 to 5. Now, I don't know how it works for you, but for me, summers were fairly light. We didn't do a lot, so I probably worked 25 hours a week in the summer. But then the 2 weeks before school and the first few weeks of orientation, I don't know. Did I do anything but work? 60, 70 hours. You get all these events. It's day after day after day. Holy Week, live in the church week. That's a lot of hours. And then if you go on a retreat or a mission trip, those are a lot of hours. And I also want you to think about, if you go on a 3-day retreat, I want you to think when you're calculating your hours now, you might think, oh, well, I'm only going to write down the 16 hours that I was awake. First of all, were you really only awake 16 hours on a retreat? Did you sleep at all? Then if you did sleep, I always would count that as hours of work because I was away from my family. I was gone for 3 days. So in my mind, I counted that. Now, if what you wanted to do more than anything else was be on that retreat, sleeping in that cabin for 4 hours, then you get to keep those 4 hours as personal leisure time, and you get to write the other 20 as work. But for me, I would say I was gone for 96 hours or whatever it was. So kind of think through, maybe it averages out to 2,000, maybe it's more. Has everyone kind of got that? Anyone need help with any calculations? Here we have the 40 hours a week and the $35,000 a year, coming right to $17.50 an hour. Okay. Now, is anyone in here willing to admit they work more than on average 40 hours a week? Okay. Does anyone want to say what you think, what your guess is on average for the year? I mean, do you think you're doing 2,500, 3,000, even more? Okay. Do you know what you were hired to do? Was an hour mentioned when you were hired? Does someone in HR have a document that says something? What's that?
It's supposed to say 30. It's supposed to be 35.
35 hours a week? Yeah. So you're in between here. Yeah. I know when I was hired it was 37.5. I don't know where they come up with these things. It was 37.5. And we fill out these timesheets every week, 7.5 hours a day. I wasn't even here on Monday, but I was here Saturday. Just write down 7.5. Okay. So 37.5. Some places could be 30 because full-time is just 1 hour more than part-time. I don't know. But the point is, if you're working, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do is show you how to get, you know where I'm going with this? I'm going to show you how to get a 25% raise. If you're working 50 hours a week, you're making $14 an hour. If you really only are supposed to be or have to be working 40 hours a week, you make $17.50 an hour. There's only so many hours in the week, and if you're going to make more money, it's got to come from somewhere. I just want you to realize, if you're working 50, but contractually and in terms of ministry, there'd be a way to do it in 40. If you back down to 40, that's 25% right there. 1750 minus 14 is 3.5. 3.5 divided by 14 is 25%. That's a 25% raise. If you're working 60 and you move to 30, I don't even know if I didn't even calculate that, but that's like 6 divided by 11, you're over 50%. It's over a 50. Think about that. You're working 60 hours a week, you're making $11.67. And I also want you to think about that, sort of humble yourself a little bit. Sometimes we say, I have a salary and I'm a professional person. I make more than hourly people. Really? 67. That's if you're on the 35. Maybe for 25, maybe 33. So you can probably find your spot on there. But I want you to start becoming aware of your dollar per hour. Okay? And I want you to see that 20% raise was laughable. We all laughed at that screen. But for those of you who are working more than you need to be or could be or should be, a 25 to 50% raise is very possible. But I want you to realize if someone makes $200,000 a year, but they're working 80 hours a week, which for some professions isn't unreasonable, it's $50 an hour, which maybe if you just found out you were making $8.57, that was good. But a lot of times we give a lot of clout to someone who makes $200,000. They're almost in the 1%, right? We give a lot of clout to that. But if they're working like crazy, 50 an hour, we're going to look at some other things down the road. 50 an hour is not that mind-blowing. And I also want you to think, maybe you got friends in the professional world or maybe in the professional world. This is sort of a trick that can happen to you. Maybe you're humming along in your career at 45,000 and you're working 40 hours a week, and then they say, you know what, we're going to give you a promotion. You're getting to become a manager, and we're going to bump you from $40,000 to $50,000 a year. But being a manager, you end up working an extra 10 hours a week. You're now making 50 cents less because of your promotion. Sometimes people get promotions, they don't even bump up on pay, they just stay longer, they got a pay decrease. Okay? Does that start to make sense? It's kind of not fun to think about, but you sort of have to think about it. All right, so I showed you how to get that 25% raise, but we can actually make it more extreme. Scenario 1, you're working 50 hours a week. It's the scenario we just went through. And that's about $700 a week, 35,000 divided by 50 weeks, $700 a week. If you do what we said, and you can get your hours down to 40, we got the 700 still here. If you can then do something with those 10 hours, not just saying, I got a raise, and then playing video games. If you can do something with those 10 hours, like start a business that you could make $40 per hour, you'd make $400 in those 10 hours, you now get $1,100 for the week, you just give yourself a 57% raise by cutting your hours down to 40 and making more money. somehow. $40 an hour, how are you going to do that? Well, one easy scenario, I mean, I really don't know why people just don't do this all the time. You cut your neighbor's grass for 20 bucks, if it takes you a half hour, that's $40 an hour. I got to get a lot of neighbors to fill in 10 hours, but I'm trying to show that $40 an hour isn't unreasonable. A lot of you have advanced degrees or advanced enough, you can tutor. You can tutor at $20 for a half hour, $40 an hour. Especially for only 10 hours a week. Now I realize you may not be able to cut grass for your whole neighborhood 40 hours a week, but I want you to start thinking, if you shaved off some time in your week, what could you do or sell or trade to make a little bit of extra money? And the reason that we spend so much time on our dollar per hour is the little thing you invent on the side, as long as it's beating this, you're doing great. Okay, so if you found out you were at 14, you bumped it to 1750, if you could go on the side and just make 1750, you're doing great. Well, anything at first is great. So maybe you cut your neighbor's grass for $9. And he's $9 for a professional to cut my grass? For a half hour, $18 an hour, you're doing better than your ministry job. No employers? Yeah, your employer. What are your thoughts at this point?
I mean, well, I'm an employer because I'm a staff of one.
Okay.
Sure. But I'm actually looking to hire a development director.
So you can raise more money,
right.
Maybe pay more. Yeah. Yeah. One reason I like to share some of these things with employers is, for example, my employer said, I wish you had a pot of gold. Well, he doesn't have a pot of gold. I worked hard to do both and to really live up to my obligation to Kelley Center. In no means am I saying slack on your job or don't live up to it, but I am saying if you're working more than maybe you need to be or should be, and you need more money, here's a solution. And employers, they can give you that slack much easier than they can give you that money.